The bridge of the Concordance flagship Eternal Vigilance was a tomb of silent, amber light. On the main viewer, the nightmare played on loop. The Void Maw was a fractal wrongness, a tear in reality that fed on starships, planets, and hope itself. Admiral Klar of the Thulians, a being of crystalline biology and military logic, watched the 7th Fleet vanish into its event horizon maw. Tactical assessment scrolled. Energy weapons ineffective, kinetic bombardment absorbed, psychic dampener shattered. Absolute entropy. Total loss. There are no further conventional options, stated the tactical logic core, its voice a chill hum. Into this silence, a new feed patched through. It showed a different bridge, chaotic, warmlit, filled with the rustle of synthetic fabrics and the soft tap of manual controls. At its center sat Captain Elias Thorne. Human, soft-skinned, bipedal, absurdly fragile. He was studying the same horrific data. Captain Thorne, Klar intoned, his crystalline body chiming with subdued despair. The Concordance requests your analysis. As a formality before we enact the final evacuation protocols. Thorne looked up. His eyes, two pools of aqueous blue, did not hold the expected fear. Instead, a slow, serene smile spread across his face. It was not a smile of joy, nor of madness. It was a smile of recognition, a smile of grim, terrible understanding. Admiral, Thorne said, his voice quiet yet carrying a shocking weight. I believe we can help. On the Eternal Vigilance, the alien commanders exchanged glances of confusion and pity. The human's expression was a physiological anomaly, a baring of teeth mistaken for bravado or idiocy. They dismissed it. What could this child race, who still clung to concepts like morale and sacrifice, possibly do against a cosmic devourer? They did not understand the smile. They would not understand it until their logic lay in ruins, and the very nature of the threat was rewritten in a language only humanity had refused to forget, the language of unyielding fire in the face of the dark. The UNS Resolute hung in the docking cradle of the Concordance starbase aegis, a sleek, gray dagger amidst the organic, coral-like structures of Thulian ships and the shifting light forms of the XYL. To the galaxy's elder races, it was a quaint artifact. It had physical viewports, manual override stations, and even a designated mess hall. It ran on fusion and fission technologies the Concordance considered pre-curricular. Its weaponry was crude projectile batteries and low-yield lasers. Its most baffling feature was its crew, 143 humans, each a riot of uncontrolled micro-expressions, vocal tonal shifts, and bizarre biological needs like laughter and caffeine. Captain Elias Thorne stood in the Resolute's observation deck, watching the intricate dance of alien vessels. His first officer, Commander Alicia Vance, approached, her posture rigid. The final briefings are in, Captain. The Concordance Military Council is skeptical. Reports label our integration as a political appeasement gesture, not a tactical asset. Thorne's lips twitched, not quite a smile. They see the hull, Alicia. They see the specs. They don't see the engine. The engine. That was the unspoken truth of humanity's entry into the stars. While the Concordance races had advanced by specializing, the Thulians in crystalline energy manipulation, the XYL in photonic computation, the hulking Gron in brute force engineering, humanity had taken a different path. They had never fully outsourced their will to machines or pure logic. Their ships required human intuition to fly at peak efficiency. Their weapons systems demanded a human finger on the trigger, a human eye on the target. The Resolute wasn't just a vessel. It was an extension of a human collective will, a concept alien to the Concordance's perfectly networked, AI-piloted fleets. The briefing chamber was a hemispherical room where representatives floated in their respective environmental fields. Admiral Klar presided, his facets dim. The Void Maw is not a biological entity. It is a cosmological predator, a walking negation of order. It consumes energy, matter, data, and consciousness. It learns, adapts, and negates. Our greatest AI war minds engaged it for 0.3 seconds before their core matrices were dissolved into nonsense. A XYL representative, a shimmer of coalesced light, pulsed. Proposed solution 9471. Saturate its predicted trajectory with supernova-level plasma. Probability of success 0.02%. Margin of error catastrophic. Thorn listened, his face a mask of calm. When invited to speak, he stood. You've tried to fight what it is. An unstoppable force. What if you fought why it is? Or how it perceives? The chamber rippled with disbelief. Perceives? Clar chimed. It is a hunger, a vacuum. It does not perceive, it consumes. For all your advances, Thorn said, his voice gentle, you may have forgotten how to think like prey, or like a hunter who isn't the strongest in the jungle. He brought up a schematic, not of the Resolute's weapons, but of its crew quarters, its neural link training simulators, its redundant life support systems. We propose a different kind of engagement, not a direct assault, but a dialogue, a misdirection. He outlined Operation Waking Watch. The Resolute, escorted by a Grand heavy cruiser, would position itself near a gas giant in the Maw's path. The humans would act as a lure, broadcasting a complex, chaotic, and emotionally charged signal. Music, overlapping human communications, raw sensor data from historical events. The theory, based on human psychological warfare and animal behavioral studies, was that the Maw's adaptive nature would force it to focus on parsing this illogical noise, creating a brief window of vulnerability for the Grand to deploy a new type of entropy inversion mine. The council was silent. Then, a wave of discordant sounds, Thullian chimes of derision, XYL flickers of dismissal, Grand grunts of disapproval. It was insanity. Using a starship as a psychological bait, it was primitive, anthropomorphic nonsense. Yet, they had no other options. Reluctantly, permission was granted. As Thorn left the chamber, a junior Thullian tactician stopped him. Your plan relies on a flaw in the Maw. A flaw your own report says is theoretical. Thorn looked at the young crystalline being. It relies on a flaw in everything, Lieutenant. Nothing is perfect, not even the end of the world. And he smiled again, that same quiet, knowing smile. The Thullian felt a deep, inexplicable chill. Back on the Resolute, the crew moved into action. There was no sterile, automated preparation. The ship buzzed with shouted orders, the clang of maintenance crews, and a tense, electric energy. In the mess, Marines played cards, their jokes sharp and loud. In the cockpit, pilots ran sims, cursing at near misses. To a Concordance observer, it was chaos. To Thorn, it was a system, a living, breathing system of morale, of well-being honed. The Grand Cruiser, indomitable will, was a mountain of armor and plasma cannons. Its captain, Borg, communicated via harsh, translated barks. Human Resolute, we will follow your theatrical plan. But when it fails, we will engage with honorable force. Your survival is not a priority. Thorn nodded. Understood, Captain Borg. Just be ready to hit the spot we designate. The timing will be everything. As the two ships jumped towards the gas giant, codenamed Kronos, Thorn addressed his crew over the ship-wide intercom. His voice was calm, fatherly. You've all seen the briefings. You know what's out there. The Concordance thinks we're fragile. They think our emotions are a weakness. Today, we show them that feeling fear and choosing to act anyway is a strength they can't even measure. Today, we don't just represent Earth. We represent every ghost from our past who stared into the dark and lit a fire. Let's go give this thing a bad day. A cheer erupted through the decks, raw and visceral. On the bridge of the indomitable will, Borg heard the translated feed and snorted. Primal noise. It will be the first thing the Maw consumes. The Resolute dropped out of warp at the edge of Kronos' glittering ring system. The Void Maw was hours away. The crew initiated the signal broadcast. From the ship's hull, a cacophony erupted. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony crashing in a static, broadcast from old Earth wars, the sounds of children playing, the screams of launch sequences, the calm voice of a long-dead astronomer describing the stars. It was a tapestry of the human condition, beautiful, terrible, and utterly irrational. Sensors focused on the approaching blight. The Void Maw entered local space. It was smaller than expected, a silent, shifting blot that made the eyes water. It moved towards a gas giant, then paused. It seemed to twitch. The chaotic human signal washed over it. On the Resolute, the science officer reported, voice cracking. "Captain, it's not ignoring the broadcast. It's analyzing it. The entropy field at its leading edge is fluctuating. Pattern recognition suggests it's trying to categorize the input. It's slowing down." A flicker of hope on the bridge. Thorne's smile was tight now, focused. "It's working. It can't cope with the noise. Borg, get ready. The moment its field coherence drops below 70%, you launch." The Grand Cruiser powered its weapons. The Maw, as if sensing the shift, began to change. The chaotic signals it was absorbing seemed to coalesce. The shifting blot condensed, then extended a single, filament-like tendril of pure blackness towards the Resolute. It moved faster than thought. A warning alarm shrieked. Direct energy targeting. It's adapted. It's created a focused anti-pattern beam from our own broadcast. The beam struck the Resolute's starboard shield. Instead of overloading it, the shield began to unravel. Equations on the engineering console dissolved into gibberish. A Marine sitting at a console suddenly forgot his own name, slumping over, drooling. "It's learning," Vance yelled. "It's using our strategy against us." Thorne's smile vanished. "Borg, fire now. All mines." The Indomitable launched its entire payload. The entropy inversion mines flew towards the Maw's distorted field. They detonated in a silent, spectacular burst of silver light that sought to re-knit reality. The Maw shuddered. For a second, it seemed to contract. Then, it absorbed the silver light, snuffed it out, and the dark tendril lashed out again, this time at the Grand Cruiser. The beam touched the Indomitable Will's immense hull. Its hyperdense armor didn't melt. It simply ceased to have ever been bonded at the molecular level. A third of the ship crumbled into inert dust. Borg's final transmission was a roar of rage and disbelief before it was cut off. The Resolute was alone. The Maw, now fully focused on this strange, noisy irritant, began to move towards it, absorbing the human signal, growing larger and more complex with every second of data it consumed. On the bridge, lit by the red glow of failure, the human crew stared at the oncoming end. Captain Elias Thorne looked at the screen, at the void that had just effortlessly dismantled their best plan. He slowly sat back in his chair, and then he did the most inexplicable thing of all. He smiled again, a sad, deep, and resolute smile. "All hands," he said, his voice impossibly calm. "Battle stations. Prepare for Operation Cinderfall." The crew, instead of despairing, responded with a grim, determined fury. The order meant something to them. Something not in the concordance manuals. Something old. Something human. The Void Maw advanced, and the Resolute held its ground, a tiny spear point against the tide of night. Silence, thick and heavy, had replaced the chaotic signal broadcast from the Resolute. The ship hung motionless against the swirling ochre of the gas giant Kronos, a deliberate stillness in the face of the advancing Maw. On the bridge, every screen showed the same horrific image. The Grand Cruiser Indomitable was a dissolving sculpture, its midsection silently eroding into cosmic dust. The Void Maw, having processed the human noise, now manifested a new, more structured form. A shifting, geometric darkness that pulsed with a sickening rhythm, mimicking the patterns it had absorbed from Beethoven and radar signals alike. Captain Thorne's order, Operation Cinderfall, had transformed the crew. The initial terror was now buried under a layer of hardened resolve. Commander Vance, her face pale but steady, spoke from her station. "Maw is accelerating on an intercept course. It's emitting a focused anti-pattern beam, scanning us. Shields are holding at 89%, but coherence is dropping just from proximity. It's learning our shield frequency. Thorn nodded, his eyes fixed on the viewer. Let it. Engineering, on my mark, rotate shield modulation to a randomized sequence. No algorithm. I want Chief Riley to pick numbers from a hat, if she has to. We need to be unpredictable. On the Concordance Starbase Aegis, the Council watched the live feed in a stunned, spectral silence. Admiral Clara's crystalline form was laced with fractures of grief and shock. The human plan had failed spectacularly, costing a Grand capital ship and its crew. The Maw was stronger, more adaptive than ever. A catastrophic misjudgment, the tactical logic course stated. The human psychological model was flawed. The entity does not think, it consumes and replicates. We are witnessing the birth of a more dangerous variant, now imprinted with human chaotic data. The XYL representative flickered with agitated light. The Resolute must be destroyed. Its continued emission, even silent, provides a template for the Maw. It is a catalyst for our annihilation. A debate erupted, cold, logical, and desperate. The consensus formed. The Resolute was a liability. A order was drafted, a command for the human ship to self-destruct to deprive the Maw of its unique pattern. But before it could be sent, Thorn initiated a tight beam transmission, audio only, to the Aegis. His voice was scratchy with interference, but unervingly composed. Admiral Clar, do not issue any commands to my ship. The experiment with noise was Phase 1. It confirmed a hypothesis. The Maw doesn't just consume. It models. It tries to understand what it eats. It just failed to understand human creativity. Now we move to Phase 2. We make it understand human consequence. Clara's facets vibrated with confusion. Captain Thorn, your actions have escalated the threat. You speak in riddles. What is Cinderfall? A human historical reference, Admiral. Thorn replied, the ghost of that smile in his voice. Sometimes, to save the orchard, you must burn a single tree. And you must be willing to stand in the fire. Please observe. And trust the process. The channel closed. On the Resolute, Thorn turned to his weapons officer. Lieutenant Shun, on the primary payload. Single warhead. Manual trigger to my station only. Shun, a young man with steady hands, paled. Sir, that's the Paris device. The containment field alone is drawing 40% of our power. If we launch, we're not launching it, Lieutenant. Thorn interrupted softly. We're delivering it. Personally. Navigation. Plot a course directly for the Maw's central mass. Full thrust on my mark. A new kind of silence gripped the bridge. This wasn't the silence of fear, but of awful comprehension. They all knew what the Paris device was. Not a bomb in the traditional sense. It was a humanity's grim last resort toy, a contained singularity event wrapped in a layered stasis field, a pinch in space-time. Its purpose was not to explode outward, but to collapse inward with impossible gravity. A theoretical weapon of absolute, localized destruction. The Concordance saw the Resolute turn, its engines flaring to maximum burn. It was not fleeing. It was charging, directly at the Void Maw. On the Aegis, the Council was aghast. It is a suicide run. Clarchand, a primitive kinetic impact will achieve nothing. But as the Resolute accelerated, it began to broadcast again. Not noise. This was a single, clean, repeating data packet. It contained no complex emotions, no art. It was a simple mathematical construct, a logical puzzle of escalating complexity, rooted in human game theory and unsolvable paradoxes like the classic unexpected hanging. A problem designed to trap a purely logical, adaptive mind in an infinite loop. The Maw, now tuned to human-derived patterns, immediately focused on the new signal. Its geometric pulsing stuttered. It slowed its advance, the anti-pattern beam shifting from a weapon to a frantic scanning tool, trying to solve, to consume, to understand the paradox. The beam washed over the Resolute, and the ship shuddered. Systems faltered. 2 crewmen on the lower decks collapsed, their neural pathways momentarily scrambled by the logical assault. But the ship held its course, a spear of metal, and, well, flying into the heart of the darkness. Shield coherence at 32%. Vance reported, her voice a tight wire. Hull integrity failing in sections 5 through 8. The maw is stuck. It's trying to compute the paradox before consuming us. Good, Thorne said, his hands hovering over the manual trigger for the Paris device. Keep feeding it variations. Loop in Zeno's paradox. Give it this statement is false. Give it everything that makes a pure logic engine scream. The distance closed. The maw filled the viewer, a wall of hungry, confused darkness. Alarms blared. The ship's AI began a monotonous countdown to impact. 50 kilometers. 40. The maw's external field is destabilizing. It's trying to solve the paradox and maintain structural cohesion simultaneously, the science officer shouted. Now, engineering. Randomized shield drop on my mark. 3-2. Mark, Thorne ordered. The Resolute's remaining shields died. For a fraction of a second, the ship was utterly naked. The maw, sensing vulnerability, instinctively lashed out with its main consumption field, the event horizon maw gaping wide to swallow the irritating puzzle race hole. In that exact moment, Thorne triggered the Paris device. But he did not launch it. He released its containment. A point of perfect blackness, smaller than a pinhead, appeared in the Resolute's forward cargo hold. It didn't explode. It began to eat. The ship's hull, from the inside out, crumpled like paper towards that infinitesimal point. The maw's consumption field met the human-made singularity's event horizon. Two absolute hungers collided. The universe seemed to hiccup. Light bent in impossible directions. Sensors on the Aegis went blind. On the visual feed, they saw the void maw, the unstoppable devourer, suddenly warp. Its perfect, dark geometry twisted, stretched, and streamed in ribbons towards a new, more fundamental point of negation, the one the humans had brought with them. The Resolute was gone, vaporized in the first microsecond, sacrificed as the delivery mechanism. But the maw was not consuming anymore. It was being consumed. It had tried to swallow a black hole disguised as a puzzle. The feedback was catastrophic for the entity. Its adaptive nature, its core programming to consume and understand became its doom. It tried to model the singularity, to absorb it. It failed. The paradoxical logic streams still flooding its mind from the Resolute's final broadcast created a fatal error in its consumption process. It couldn't process the self-referential logic and the physical paradox of the singularity at the same time. With a silent, telepathic scream that echoed in the minds of every psychic-sensitive species in the sector, the void maw fractured. It didn't die in an explosion. It died in a paradox. It unraveled, its stolen reality dissolving into harmless, inert hawking radiation that sparkled against the face of Kronos. The sensor clearing revealed emptiness. Noma, nodeselot. Only expanding dust that was once a Grand Cruiser and a human ship, and a fading, beautiful shimmer of converted energy. On the Aegis, the silence was absolute. The tactical logic core broke it, its voice for the first time uncertain, halting. The threat is neutralized. Causality breach detected at the epicenter. The human vessel utilized a contained singularity as a bait and a logical paradox as a trigger. This was not a military tactic. This was a philosophical weapon. Admiral Clark looked at the void where the humans had been. He replayed Thorne's last words. Sometimes, to save the orchard, you must burn a single tree. And you must be willing to stand in the fire. They had not just stood in the fire. They had become the fire. They had looked at absolute consumption and offered it a meal it could not digest, a taste of its own medicine, wrapped in a riddle. The human smile, that baring of teeth, now made a terrible, awe-inspiring sense. It was not a sign of madness or ignorance. It was the smile of a species that had spent its entire history staring into abysses, of fear, of despair, of the unknown, and had learned to smile back because smiling was the first act of defiance. It was the precursor to a punch, a poem, or a plan to trap a god in a logic puzzle and kill it with a black hole. Clar felt a new emotion, one his race had no name for. It was a mixture of profound shame, staggering awe, and a chilling realization. Humanity was not frail. They were the most dangerous creatures the Concordants had ever encountered because they weaponized the very things the galaxy had discarded: paradox, sacrifice, and hope. The human captain had smiled, and now, far too late, they began to understand. The gleaming debris field near Kronos was a somber monument. Scattered atoms that had once been the UNS Resolute and the Indomitable were now mingled with the fading, glittering afterbirth of the Void Maw's demise. On the Concordance starbase Aegis, the Victory was a hollow, echoing chamber. Admiral Clar oversaw the recovery drones, his crystalline form still subtly vibrating from the psychic aftershock of the Maw's death scream. The data was conclusive. The threat was eliminated. The cost was precisely quantified. 1 Gron heavy cruiser, 1 human exploratory vessel, 2,417 lives. A favorable tactical exchange against an existential threat, according to the logic core. But the numbers felt like ash. The final transmission from Captain Thorne played on a loop in a secured chamber. Sometimes, to save the orchard, you must burn a single tree. The human metaphor was illogical. Orchards were cultivated, trees were expendable units for the greater health. Yet the concept of being the one to choose, to stand, and to burn unsettled the Concordance's collective soul in a way the Maw never had. A week later, the official memorial service was a multi-species affair, held in the Aegis's central arboretum. Representatives of the Gron offered deep, resonant chants of honor for a warrior's death. The XYL manifested a complex, beautiful light sculpture that slowly dissolved, symbolizing transient life. The Thulians stood in rigid, silent rows, their facets refracting the light in patterns of formal grief. The human delegation was small: an ambassador, a few aides, and a single, aging admiral named James McCullough. He listened to the eulogies, his face a weathered mask. When it was his turn, he did not speak of tactical brilliance or noble sacrifice. He cleared his throat, the sound harsh in the quiet. Captain Elias Thorne was my friend. He began, his voice rough. He liked bad coffee, terrible old movies, and he could never keep a cactus alive. He wasn't a philosopher or a superhero. He was a man who loved his crew and his home. What you saw, that smile you couldn't understand, that was him focusing. That was him looking at a problem so big and so wrong that the only sane response was to find the thread, the one flawed seam, and pull. He looked at Clar, his eyes direct. You see, we humans have a long history with monsters. We used to think they lived in the dark. Then we learned the dark is just empty. The real monsters are the ideas that tell you to give up. The Void Maw wasn't just eating your ships. It was eating your will to fight. Elias saw that, so he gave it something else to chew on. He gave it a fight it couldn't win, because it was a fight fought on our terms. Not with better guns, but with a better reason to hold them. The speech was not translated well. Better reason was parsed as improved tactical objective. The essence was lost, but the feeling in the room shifted. The humans mourned, yes, but there was a current of fierce, defiant pride in their tears. They called it a good death. The Concordants found the term grotesque. In the days that followed, the analysis began. The tactical logic core, alongside Thulian strategists and XYL pattern analysts, dissected every millisecond of the engagement. They recreated the paradoxical data streams, modeled the singularity device, and ran simulations. In every sim where a Concordant ship attempted the same maneuver, it failed. The AI pilots would not charge into certain death without a statistically viable exit strategy. The networked crews, their emotions suppressed for efficiency, could not generate the chaotic, resilient morale that kept the Resolute's crew functional as their ship disintegrated around them. The plan required not just sacrifice, but a specific, willing, understanding sacrifice, a concept outside their operational parameters. A quiet, Profound unease seeped into the concordance. They had witnessed an act they could simulate, but not replicate. It was an asymmetry that was deeply threatening to a civilization built on predictability and logical progression. Meanwhile, in a secure lab, a team studied the only physical remnant of the Resolute, a single data core ejected in the final second before the singularity activated. It was heavily encrypted, but the Concordance's decryption AIs finally broke the human codes. Most of it was mundane: crew logs, maintenance schedules, personal letters home. But one file labeled Cinderfall, Post-Engagement Contingency, was addressed to Admiral Clar. It was from Captain Thorne, recorded before the final engagement. The holographic Thorne appeared, looking tired but calm. "Admiral, if you're seeing this, Phase 2 worked. The Maw is gone, and my crew is gone. I'm sorry for the loss of the Grawn. They were brave. Tell Borg's family. Tell them he died facing the dark, which is all any of us can hope for." He paused, his expression turning grave. "But I need to warn you, we didn't just kill it. We changed it. Our science team had a theory. The Maw wasn't natural. It was a weapon or a tool gone feral, a thing designed to consume order. By feeding it human chaos, by killing it with a paradox, we may have infected its source code, for lack of a better term. The energy signature of its dissolution didn't just vanish. It retreated. It snapped back along a trajectory our sensors couldn't trace, but the Paris device's stasis field recorded a vector. Coordinates are attached. A star map appeared, pointing to a region of space uncharted by the Concordance, a void between galactic arms. The Maw came from somewhere, and we just sent a very loud, very messy message back to where it came from. A message written in human defiance. They, whoever they are, now know their perfect consumer can be broken. And they know we broke it. They'll be coming, not with another Maw, but with curiosity, or with wrath." Thorne's face softened into that familiar, knowing smile. It no longer seemed unsettling to Clar. It seemed like a shield. "Don't fear them, Admiral, and don't try to be them. Just be ready. And when they come, remember the tree. Remember the fire. And for Star's sake, build a bigger orchard." The transmission ended. Panic, cold, and logical swept through the Concordance high command. A greater threat? A maker of the Maw? The humans had not only destroyed a monster, they had potentially provoked its creators. The human victory was now reframed as a catastrophic provocation. Admiral McCullough was summoned before the council. The atmosphere was hostile. Clar, though personally shaken by the message, presented the consensus. Your captain's actions, while effective, were reckless on a galactic scale. He has invited a retaliation we cannot quantify. Humanity's integration into the Concordance is hereby put on probationary review. Your martial practices, your philosophical weaponry will be studied and regulated. McCullough listened, his hands clasped behind his back. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried the weight of continence. "You're missing the point. Elias didn't invite them. They were already out there. The Maw was proof. He didn't start this war. He just fired the first shot back. And he told you how to prepare. We will prepare by fortifying our borders, by analyzing the threat, by developing counters based on sound science, not metaphor and sacrifice." XYL representative flickered. McCullough smiled then, a thin, hard smile that was a mirror of thorns. "Admiral Clar, you asked me once what Cinderfall meant. It's from an old human story. When an enemy army marched through a land, burning everything, the defenders set fire to their own fields ahead of them. They left no food, no shelter, only ash. The enemy, faced with a wasteland they could not consume, starved, turned on each other, and broke. Cinderfall isn't about one ship's sacrifice. It's a doctrine. It's the willingness to destroy what you love, to deny an enemy its purpose. Elias applied it to a single monster. The warning is that the next enemy might be an army. And you can't set fire to a galaxy. You have to become the fire that chooses what burns." He looked around the council chamber, at the bewildered, fearful faces of beings who commanded star systems. "You want to regulate us? To make us more like you? Logical, predictable, That's what the Maw fed on. Good luck. He turned and left. The council was left with the coordinates, the warning, and a dawning horrific understanding. The humans were not just dangerous. They were contagious. Their ideas of defiant sacrifice, of tactical absurdity, of weaponized will, were a virus that threatened the orderly, logical foundations of the Concordance itself. And somewhere in the deep void between stars, something ancient and cold had received a message written in the death scream of its pet. A message of chaotic, paradoxical, beautiful violence. It was a message that demanded a response. The human captain had smiled. They were beginning to understand the cost of that smile. And they feared the bill had yet to arrive. 5 standard cycles passed. The Concordance had changed. The chilling warning from Captain Thorne's posthumous message had acted like a slow-acting toxin in the galactic body politic. Fortifications, the Kronos line, were erected at the edge of the mapped galaxy, facing the vector of the Maw's retreat. Fleets were redesigned, thicker armor, more redundant systems, less reliance on networked AI. But the changes were skin-deep. The core philosophy remained logical, defensive, and deeply fearful of the unknown Mawmakers. Humanity, officially on probation, was treated as a dangerous asset. Their ships were assigned to scouting and reconnaissance, roles the Concordance deemed expendable. Human advisors were listened to with polite, distant skepticism. The story of the Resolute had become a legend, but to the Concordance, it was a dark legend, a cautionary tale about the price of irrational courage. Admiral Clark found himself in a quiet minority, one that reread Thorne's final words and felt not fear, but a desperate need to comprehend the human fire. It was a lone human scout ship, the UNS Pathfinder, that first detected the anomaly. Not at the Kronos line, but coreward near a dormant pulsar. Space itself was bleeding. A subtle, wrong curvature, a scent of ozone, and rotting mathematics on the sensors. The Pathfinder's captain, a descendant of the Resolute's Marines, did not retreat to report. She edged closer, broadcasting a simple, repeating greeting in all known languages, and, on a personal whim, the opening chords of a blues guitar riff. The response was not a message. It was an unfolding. Space around the pulsar tessellated, and 3 ships emerged. They were not physical in any conventional sense. They were sculptures of solidified thought, geometry so perfect it hurt to look at. They made the Void Maw look like a wild, natural beast. These were refined, elegant instruments. They scanned the Pathfinder. In a nanosecond, they dissected its technology, its biology, its culture from its electromagnetic emissions. They found the echoes of the paradox that killed the Maw. They found the blues riff. Then, they sent a single, omnidirectional pulse. It wasn't a weapon. It was a command, translated directly into the consciousness of every sentient being within 10 light years. Cease. You are illogical. You will be corrected. The pulse hit the Pathfinder. Its systems didn't fail. They became perfectly ordered. The fusion reactor stabilized into a permanently inert state. All data on its drives sorted itself into a single, infinitely repeating sequence of ones. The crew's brainwaves smoothed into a flat, blissful, vegetative line. The ship became a frozen, pristine tomb of absolute order. It was not destruction. It was a cure for the disease of chaos, which included life, thought, and free will. The entities the Concordance now called them the Curators moved. They did not attack the Kronos line. They simply appeared past it, their transition ignoring conventional physics. They targeted a Thulian mining colony. The same pulse was emitted. The bustling, crystalline city fell silent. Thulians were frozen in place, their vibrant internal light patterns fixed on a single, static hue. Machines stopped. Wind ceased. It was the peace of the grave, imposed by perfect logic. Panic, pure and illogical, erupted across the Concordance. Fleets engaged. Plasma bolts were absorbed, and their energy converted into harmless, structured light. AI targeting systems were corrected, and shut down. The curators advanced, methodically, patiently, curing world after world of the illness of entropy and choice. They were the antithesis of the consuming maw. The maw had been hunger. The curators were surgeons, removing the diseased tissue of unpredictability from the universe. The Concordance war machine, the pinnacle of logical military science, was useless. Worse, it was fuel for the curators, who used their own ordered systems against them, turning entire fleets into synchronized, lifeless ornaments. In a crisis council on the Aegis, despair had taken hold. The Logic Core presented its final analysis. Resistance is computationally irrational. Their technology operates on a paradigm we cannot interfere with. They are not destroying us. They are optimizing us into non-existence. The only logical conclusion is to surrender to the correction. Existence in a static state is preferable to annihilation. It was then that Admiral James McCullough, who had been observing in silence, stepped forward. He was not invited. He ignored protocol. This response is AI-generated, for reference only.